Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Timur Yaprak. I'm a service sales executive covering the Michigan area. I've been with Siemens for about 8 years or so now, and really helping our customers here in the Michigan area um, grow and really meet their productivity needs. Go ahead, Gail.
I'm Gail Norris. I've been with Siemens about 22 years, coming up on. And half of that time I've been heading C-Train in the US, which is our learning services organization. So we're very happy to be here to talk to you about what we can do for you in regards to learning and learning services. And I'm going to try and share presentation. I want to thank David Wood, who's also on, for all of his work in putting this together in a new format for us. So any feedback is welcome, both on the content and on the approach. So first of all, we view learning services a little bit differently maybe than some of the others in the business do. We are very much looking at this as a consultative approach that we do in conjunction with our customers and their needs. So I want to take out some bandwidth there so this doesn't crash on me, and really talk to you about what that means for you in regards to your learning journey. It is a journey. It is not a once and done type of thing. We have to constantly refresh ourselves. I know every one of you has probably learned throughout your career, and you continue to learn. That's the joy of living. If we're not learning something every day, it's sometimes a wasted day. So let's talk about what that learning looks like. Competence, skills, that terminology is being used more and more in how we get our people skilled up, how we get them to a competence level, how we get them to a set of skills that we need for our businesses. It does require laying out a path, a strategic workforce plan, if you will, that really drives your workforce where you need it to be at a point in the future. As you can tell by the pens, sometimes that's a little murky and you have to adjust course frequently as you're going through this. We can help you to develop that and guide it. Gartner, and this is a few years old now, but it's still true. Number one concern of the C-suite is access to the right talent and skills. As we go through this and we look at what that learning journey looks like, we'd really like to talk to you a little bit more about what you're doing with your business. Have you had any of these instances? Have you put in new Siemens products? Have you upgraded? Is downtime rising, especially on off shifts? Are you going through a lot of retirement change out? Are your employees engaged, or could your employee engagement score be a little higher? All of these are linked to learning and investing in your employees. And as you look at that comment that 46% of workers will leave their employer if they don't see a commitment to skilling. Upskilling, reskilling, there's a bunch of different terminology around it. But employees today are looking for you as employers to invest in their skill sets, to make sure that they're continuing to learn as they go forward in their careers with you. 99% of the time, if you're investing in your employees, they're not going to leave you. They're going to stay with you long term. That's, of course, if you want them to. We've been talking about the new normal for a long time. We're now at the next normal. We're there, and it's changing what we're doing. Manufacturing had a net loss of 578,000 jobs during the pandemic. They've got 500,000 of those jobs still open because we don't have the right skill sets. We can't acquire the right skill sets. While this was a 2018 headline, it's still relevant today. We've got the jobs, but we don't have the people. And I love this quote from Tom Hood. In a period of rapid change and increasing complexity, the winners are going to be the people who can learn faster than the rate of change and faster than their competition. That is so, so true. as agile as you can make your workforce, as constantly reskilled and upskilled they can be, the more likely you're going to be able to address any new twist that is thrown at us in this VUCA world adroitly and agilely. We talk about continuous learning, lifelong learning, the employee life cycle. It becomes much more a day-to-day learning environment. It has to be. Kids graduating from school today, I call them kids because I have 3 of them, are going to have to relearn their jobs at least every 2 years over the course of their career. It's changing that dramatically. That's why you have to implement that continuous learning mindset. It's got to be a part of their everyday life. They've got to learn something every single moment they're on the job, and they've got to take charge of it. They've got to be at the center of that growth mindset. Employee agility. If 50% of the folks in jobs are looking for new jobs in the US, and 50% of the jobs are going to change or disappear in the next 10 years, that simply says your focus, your biggest strategic focus has to be on that strategic workforce plan and how do you maintain the skill sets you need for your future. If there are any questions in this, just kind of shout them out and I'll look for the blue circles because sometimes I can't hear you talking during that. But if Timur and David will yell at me to shut up, I'll be more than happy to shut up and answer your questions. This slide is during the pandemic. It's a McKinsey study. And what I found really intriguing about it is that the jobs that immediately got lost during the pandemic are also the jobs that were predicted to be lost due to automation and digitalization. So we got a rapid redirection into that digitalization. And even McDonald's is looking at how many positions they can no longer have a need for as a result of automating their processes. Walmart is looking at automating all of their cashiers and going to self-checkout. So you look at those kind of really low skill entry level jobs that are being eliminated. What they're creating in their wake, though, is a higher level skill job to maintain that automation, to improve upon and continue to maintain the operations of that digitalization. So that's really good news for most of us as we're in manufacturing and we're kind of at the forefront of all of that. But it's also going to change the way we live. If 50% of the states in the US have 50% of their employment based on truck drivers, long haul truck drivers, automation of trucks is going to be huge. Another McKinsey slide, but it really lays out how most jobs can be automated in some way, shape, or form. I got a question the other day about empathy and support. How can you say empathy and support is only 13% human? You start to think about it and you realize there's an awful lot you can augment in regards to sympathy and support that makes it easier to condone and deliver empathy and support. So this kind of stuff is happening. We look at maintenance and operations, only 4%, 3 to 4% is distinctly human. Most of it can be automated or augmented. It's harder today, after the pandemic, or almost after, to find the right people than it was before the pandemic. And we thought we were in a job skills shortage then. As we go through all of this transformation that we're going in regards to digitalization, we're also going through some learning transformation. Jobs are transforming, going from standard, deep expertise jobs to hybrid jobs, where people are expected to know multiple technologies across the lines and be able to morph easily in and out of that. For skill sets, 1970, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that's only 50 years ago, guys. Morphing into much more cognitive skill sets in 2015. This is World Economic Forum data. 2018, even more so, with some new ones cropping up here. EQ, which a lot of us have been studying for 10, 15 years, but now it's a valued skill set, and cognitive flexibility. For Siemens, we call that Handlungskompetenz. It is a key factor in our Siemens mechatronics program that we do with community colleges. And what it means is you learn something in one scenario and you're able to apply that same logic in another scenario and solve the problem. Key and critical to most maintenance techs and mechatronics curriculums. Forecasted for 2022. I apologize, I have not seen the 2025 forecast from WEF yet, but they're updating it fairly regularly now. These are even more cognitively realized, and you see some of the things on here. I especially love the active learning agility. How do you hire people to have that capability to learn ongoing? That would be critical for your success going forward. If you hire people who can't learn something new on a regular basis, they're probably not going to help you a lot long term. Adult learners, they do learn differently than folks in school. So you also have to recognize that as people settle into jobs and routines, they get a little bit of a mindset that this is the way I learn, and they get fixated on that. So you do have to have different modalities to address that. We have face-to-face, we have digital, we have virtual, and we're introducing our virtual reality next month, I believe. So there's a lot of things you need to consider as you look at your workforce and how you want them to learn and what you want them to learn. Again, this curve that Burson introduced back in 2013, the idea of the Ebbinghaus curve is basically saying after you have a learning event, you will lose everything or lose 80% of what you learned within 2 weeks. So that retention loss is huge after you come out of one event. But if you create a curve or a support structure around it that really reinforces the learning, you can retain it long term. I believe it's 3 times before it becomes muscle memory, maybe a few more, but that type of approach to learning is critical. Manufacturing went through this about, I'd say 30, 40 years ago, from just in case to just in time. Manufacturing then just enough, finally customizing just for me, Nike Speed Factories. We're going through the same thing with learning. We used to learn just in case we ever needed to know it. Then it was just in time, we Googled it. Now we've got these little learning nuggets, just enough, and we're finally figuring out how to customize it and make it just for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Timur to go through the portfolio. Any questions or comments on any of that background? All right, Timur, just tell me when to click.
Go ahead, Gail. Thank you. Next slide. All right, so with our C-Train portfolio, we really build trust and confidence through a number of different ways. As Gail mentioned, there really isn't a one size that fits all, right? We've got C-Train Open, C-Train Access, and C-Train Personal, and I'll be going into a little bit more of those here in a minute. Next slide, please. So there's a reason why manufacturers and employers train their employees and staff, right? It's really not just about training. It's about productivity, people, and purpose. In another recent McKinsey article, I read something that mentioned there was about 64% of executives that said that the main reason they were willing to invest in retraining was to increase employee productivity. And as companies adapt to more lean operations, due to digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, plant operational efficiency will become even more imperative. Okay, and employees will need to focus in on higher value activities and become even more versatile than they are today. I believe that continuous learning, continuous improvement, through collaboration will really be key in this transition. And in order to actually realize the potential productivity dividends from these investments made in these areas, companies will ultimately have to have the people and processes in place to capture it. That's why ignoring these trends will really put organizations in a vulnerable place in the near future. Next slide, please. So with C-Train, there are different offerings that we have within our portfolio that we can ultimately pull from. So I think that everyone is familiar with our classroom training offering. We also have virtual instructor-led learning as well, which has really grown over the last year. We do have a new offering called C-Train Access, which is really neat and is really micro bite-sized learning that Gail was mentioning that can be ultimately personalized and also customized to that given individual. Next slide, please. So this is our virtual instructor-led courses that we've got available this year. This is a very extensive list, but this is something that has grown significantly over the last year. And, you know, we've received great feedback from our customers and are continuing to grow this list of courses available. We are really delivering the same material and content as what would be delivered in a classroom course, just in a virtual setting. So in the comfort of your home office, you can access these courses here. Next slide, please. This is also a fairly new offering that we have, virtual machine rental. This is where ultimately you can rent out a virtual machine with all the necessary software installed, and you can also have or order some time from our instructors where you can go through, you know, a particular program that you might have put together after attending one of our courses, and if you want to run that by one of our certified instructors, this is our offering to do so. Next slide, please. And then finally, our how-to videos. These are small, you know, about 2 to 4 minute videos that are really task-based. And I think we've got over, I think it's 400 videos available that's been in all these different areas of our automation portfolio that you can access even from your mobile device, which is very helpful and useful when you're on your plant floor. Next slide, Gail, and I think that's handed over to you.
Yeah, so just a couple other topics to kind of give you some feel for the organization and what we've done, an example of what we've done for a customer and customization. Learning ROI, I think we've struggled a lot in regards to how to define it. It's a huge topic of conversation in regards to L&D folks today. Number of ways to measure it. We still like the old KPIs. These are readily available in most organizations. If you look at your net promoter scores, your customer satisfaction, retention, and share of wallet, all of those are going to indicate to a huge extent how well your training and learning programs are working. Internally, productivity per head is hands down one of the best one. To Timur's point, continuous improvement, continuous learning will only drive that number forever higher. Looking at your attrition, really doing a comprehensive job on exit interviews, making sure you understand why people are leaving, and then creating that good environment for them to leave. So if you end up with a boomerang employee, it's a good return for them, and there's not a resentment on either side. They can often serve as ambassadors for your company once they're out there working in some other domain. So just an example of what we've done with one of our major customers, global player. They didn't like our standard courses. They weren't really delivering what they needed. So they came to us and say, how do we fix this? How can we make sure that our new hires are getting the base training they need to be a success in our plants? How do we make sure that it's a global program that we can deploy uniformly to all our plants around the world? And how do we make it cheaper? So we got together, said, okay, we're going to lead the deployment because we do have a global footprint. We've got the ability to develop a common simulator, which we did with them, and we can distribute that around the world. We did a learning needs analysis with them, and then we created a joint working and funding program to drive it forward. Their big issue was really around troubleshooting, not programming. They did not want the predominance that we had focused on programming in their courseware. They wanted to flip that to more of a troubleshooting approach. So what we did was we created a common simulator based on the hardware they had in their plant, including the IT interface. We took the 3 weeks of courses that we normally delivered on our standard format, took about 50 to 60% of the content, repurposed it, adding in their specific application information, and created customer specific content for them. They've been using that content for the last 10 years to great success around the world. The other big thing that we did for them as a part of that was we took the 3 weeks worth of content and added an additional week across those 3 weeks of troubleshooting. So that then devolved into a task checklist that we could validate that they could do the troubleshooting that the customer was asking them to do. It was signed off by the instructor and the student. So they both agreed, yes, I can do this. And it was given back to the customer, and they kept that as documentation, both of passing the class and of skills and competencies for their database. If the student did not exhibit all of the skills, they did repeat the class. So it was a joint effort on both of our parts to make sure they got the skill sets they needed and they could actually execute them. So what they had at the end of the day, based on what the plants fed back to their learning and development folks, was a workforce that was capable of doing what they learned. And we reduced the cost for them significantly. Like I said, this has been running for 10 years. We just recently revised the program again for them and updated it based on new software issued. I'm looking forward to it running for another 10 years. Looking at our instructor base, we have a very diverse team. I love the diversity that you see here, as well as the diversity I see when I look at them, because each aspect brings a different perspective and a different tool set to the delivery in the classroom. So when they're standing in front of maintenance technicians, they can relate to them because they've done maintenance and field service. When they're standing in front of the engineers, they can relate to them because they've done application engineering and tech support. So you get that kind of awareness and cognizance of the other person and being in their shoes, and that relatability translates oh so well in regards to how the students absorb what the knowledge transfer is attempting to do. Our NPS, we run between 79 and 80% over the last couple of years. We kind of stopped trying to get to 90% because the added effort, the cost to get there just wasn't really going to impact what we were doing in there. I can tell you that anytime I see a dip down to 70%, I can almost always point to the exact class where it happened and why they were unhappy. The majority of them are they're in the wrong class. They should have taken a different class. They're in a programming class. They should have been in a maintenance class, and or they did not take the prereqs and bypass the prereqs to get into the class, and the class was over their head. We've had very few instances where it was just they were completely dissatisfied with the instructor. I will say I had one of those 10 years ago. That instructor doesn't work for us anymore. But the majority of it is very, very good, as is our SSI. So with all of that, are there any questions, thoughts? You guys want to go into any further detail in regards to what we can do for you in regards to the portfolio or anything else?
So I got a question. This is Deepak Patel. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so I just asked a question in the chat, but I can rephrase it. So when you, going back a few slides, you build a model for a customer, is that based on the existing system that they had and basically build a code and debug it offline?
We built the tools that we could teach their base level technicians what they
Oh,
needed to know to go out on the line and troubleshoot the line.
I see. Okay. So I have worked at the airport systems where you emulate the whole line with all the field devices and emulated
Yes,
in software. Do you guys do that as well?
we can.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. David, Timur, anything we missed?
No,
Looks
I don't
good to
think
me.
so. Any other questions? Thoughts, comments?
Where would you like to see us go as Siemens? What would you like to see us offering to you? From a learning perspective only, please.
I've been a Rockwell guy for 25 years. I never had the opportunity to program Siemens, and I just downloaded the software and starting to play with it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have any tips on that. I've never had training on anything. You just kind of pick it up and go, but sometimes that's not the best thing.
We do have an AV to Siemens course that we do
Okay.
virtually as well. If you'd be interested in that, that'll show you the highlights and take you basically to a programming 2 level.
Okay.
All right, then. Thank you all for your time. And Amy, thank you very much.